You know how when you're on a field trip, you think, today is gonna be the best day ever. But what if I told you that I went on a field trip that was so bad that when it ended, the whole class left without me and I was stranded? This is how it all started. It was late October, middle of the fall, where everything smells like cinnamon and you see pumpkins all over the place. And every year during this time, our school would take my grade to a pumpkin patch for a field trip. Nothing fancy, just hay rides, overpriced cider, and a sad little petting zoo with goats that definitely shouldn't have been that aggressive. No one ever really got that excited for this field trip because it was pretty boring, but it was an excuse to not be in class. That's all we cared about. So when we pulled up in the school bus to the pumpkin patch, I barely paid attention. But when we got off the bus, that's when I saw it. And I swear, it felt like it was calling to us like the Green Goblin's mask calls to him. What is it that I'm talking about? A corn maze. Just off to the side of the pumpkin patch was a massive, tall corn maze. It was at least 7 feet high, and it looked super thick, as if it hadn't been trimmed in years. And even from the outside, you could barely see past the entrance before the walls of corn swallowed everything. There were signs posted near the entrance to it that said things like, "Corn maze closed for the season. Do not enter. Authorized staff only." Naturally, me and my friend Jason looked at these signs, then looked at each other, and grinned. We both agreed. The pumpkin patch was super boring. We didn't care about that. But this was the real field trip. We both agreed, let's go in it. We weren't supposed to. We were assigned to a group by our classes. So while our group and our chaperone was busy watching a worker show how to pick a pumpkin, which was literally just grab it by the stem and twist. Wait, pause. But anyways, as the workers were showing that, we snuck away, past the bales of hay, and through a fence that said, "Employees only." And just like that, we were away from the class and in the corn maze. When we first stepped in it, I hesitated. Not because I was scared, okay, maybe a little bit, but because I didn't want to get in trouble. Jason, on the other hand, was already halfway inside the maze. "Dude, come on. We'll be back before anyone even notices." So after he reassured me, I stepped in after him. But I never should have done that. Because once we got fully into the maze, the whole world changed. When you were inside the maze, it was so thick that everything was completely quiet. Like dead quiet. The corn maze was so thick that sunlight was barely even able to get through it. But Jason led the way like he knew where he was going, and I just followed him. I followed close behind him, not trying to think about the horror movie situation that we just stepped into without knowing. And he kept saying, "Just follow the right wall. It's a maze trick. If you follow the right wall, you'll always find the exit." I've never been in a corn maze before, so I just trusted what he said and kept my hand on that wall. Knowing what I know now, that man had no clue what he was talking about. Because we walked for about 10 minutes straight, twisting, turning, trying to pretend like we weren't getting deeper and deeper into something we definitely weren't supposed to be in. At first, it was kind of fun. The paths were wide enough to walk side by side, and every few turns felt like solving a little puzzle. See? Isn't this way cooler than being at the pumpkin patch and watching goats eat people's backpacks? I did agree that being in the corn maze was exciting, but something about it felt off. Not in a scary way yet, but there just wasn't something right about it. Because the further we walked into it, the more it swallowed everything around us. Now, you couldn't hear kids shouting in the distance, you couldn't hear laughter from the pumpkin patch. The only thing we heard were our own footsteps. Where even are we right now? Probably like the middle of the maze. I'm sure we're almost there. Jason said it like he was guessing. Like he wanted to sound confident, but really, he had no idea where we were at either. Are you sure this thing actually ends? Yeah, all mazes have exits. That's like literally the definition of a maze. What we didn't know is that this wasn't any normal maze, because the turning point came when we passed a corn stalk that had a zip tie on it. Bright red, just dangling on. And keep in mind, it was bright red. I didn't think much of it until 5 minutes later, after walking, we passed the exact same one. Wait. Hold up, that's the same one from earlier. No, it's not. It is. Same color, same height, same broken leaf right next to it. There could be more than one of these things. No, but I specifically remember this one having a broken leaf right next to it and a bright red zip tie. I think we're going in circles. Dude, I know where we're going. Really? Because I don't think you do. After I said that, Jason snapped. Okay, you lead then. I wasn't saying I know the right way. Then what are you saying? You want to turn back? And go where? I didn't have a good answer because, truthfully, I had no idea where we were at. But I knew that after passing this zip tie and that leaf, we were going in a circle. I just don't want to keep walking in the same loop over and over again. So go your own way then. Okay, fine. We both stood there, pretending we knew more than the other person, and then Jason pointed down the path to the left. I'm going that way. Don't follow me. And just like that, he turned and walked off. I didn't stop him, even though my heart was starting to beat really fast now, but I was mad at him and he was being stubborn. So I turned the opposite direction, to the right, which was the opposite way of what we just went, and I started walking in that direction. I figured I'd catch up with him later at the exit. We'd joke about it, blame each other for being wrong, but after that moment, I never saw Jason again. After Jason disappeared down his own path, it got really quiet now. All I could hear was the breeze pushing through the corn leaves above me. Every turn I took, I became less confident that I knew where I was at. And as I'm walking, just trying to figure out the right way to go to get out of here, that's when I saw the first weird thing. I turned a corner and saw what looked like a scarecrow standing in the path ahead. Except it wasn't on a stick or a platform like all the other ones I saw. It was just leaned up against the corn, like someone forgot to install it properly. And under its arm, there was a shovel. The first time I walked by it, I didn't really stop for long to look at it. I turned left, walked a little quicker trying to figure out where to go. But 5 minutes later, after walking around a little more, there it was again. Same scarecrow, same shovel. But that couldn't have been possible because I walked in the opposite direction of where it was. There was no way I should have ended up right back at it. But I knew it was the same one because all the other scarecrows around there didn't look like that. So when I saw it, I spun around and took a different path. Now I was starting to pick up the pace. But a couple minutes later, it happened again. I turned a corner and there he was, the scarecrow. Same outfit, still leaning against the corn, but this time the shovel was facing the other way. I had no idea what this meant. All I knew was now I'm starting to get worried. So I turned again and walked faster. I wasn't full on running yet, but I was close. The maze had fully turned from being fun and spooky to just straight up scary. At this point, I was saying, "Ref, I don't want to play anymore." I didn't know if I was just going in loops, if there were somehow multiple scarecrows that looked the exact same in the exact same spots, or if I was being followed and messed with. But I didn't like any of these options. But then, in the middle of all this panic, I saw something new. A red laser dot. It was tiny, just flicking across the corn wall about 20 feet ahead. It moved quickly, like someone was moving a laser pointer trying to get a cat's attention. It zipped from wall to wall, then hovered on the ground for a second, and then it completely vanished. I froze when I saw it, just trying to follow it with my eyes. After it went away, I tried making sense of it. What did this mean? Was someone watching me? Is a weapon pointed at me right now? Because I've played Call of Duty. I know exactly what that red laser dot means. And I was not trying to be trick-shotted in a corn maze. After it went away, I just kept going, trying to ignore what I just saw. But then, the laser flicked on again. But it was low this time, aiming at my ankles. I took another step forward, and just like that, it vanished again. I didn't trust it. I had no idea what this meant. So I turned the other direction and kept walking. A couple minutes go by. I'm still lost in this maze, and that is when I hear voices. Not shouting or clear words, just faint, repetitive murmurs echoing through the corn. I follow the voices, and that's when I saw it. A small black box, zip-tied to a wooden stake, covered in cobwebs as if it hadn't been touched in years. What was this box, you ask? Well, as I got closer to it, I realized that it was a speaker, and after standing next to it for a couple seconds, I heard,
"Careful, you're not alone."
Then another message said,
"Don't turn around."
After it said these messages, there was just laughter. Creepy laughter. It was a prop, some kind of automated Halloween sound machine, like the ones they sell for haunted houses. I realized that someone probably wasn't messing with me. This speaker was just there from when the corn maze was open. The only problem was, the corn maze wasn't open, so why was the speaker playing? I didn't know. I had so many questions, and at this point, very little answers. And keep in mind, while I'm walking, going through all of this, every few minutes, the red laser keeps reappearing. Always just for a couple seconds, and then it would click away. And I still had no idea whether to run from it or run to it. Hawk Tua. I'm done. By now, in my head, I wasn't in a maze anymore. I was in a trap. Every turn felt the same. As I was walking, it felt like deja vu no matter where I went. At this point, it must have been about like 6 or 7 because the sunlight faded and now it was starting to get dark. So I felt even more of a reason to have to hurry up. I must have turned down at least 20 more paths. Some led to nothing, some looped me right back around to where I was before, and at some point, it stopped being scary and now it was just annoying. So I started trying new tactics out. I figured maybe Jason was still in the maze. Let's try to find out. So I shouted, "Jason!" Nothing. I tried it one more time, but still no response. So I was alone, fully alone, in a big corn maze with no idea how to get out. But you know what the one constant was in this maze? The red laser. By the way it was moving, I could clearly tell that it was a person using it. It was going in different directions, but every time it showed up, it felt like it was getting closer because the laser became thicker. But what I didn't know is that this little laser would be the answer to all my questions. Because I was really confused every time I saw it. Was someone in this maze with me? If they were, why weren't they just calling out for my name? If it was a staff member or a teacher or even Jason, why wouldn't they have just said something by this point? But the one thing that made me question whether a real person was handling the laser was that I never heard any noises, just the laser showing up whenever it felt like it. And it gave me anxiety every time I saw it because I didn't know whether it was trying to help me or hunt me. And then just when the silence started to settle again, I heard a voice.
"You're not supposed to be here."
I whipped around when I heard that, but saw nothing.
"Turn back while you can."
I turned the next corner, trying to figure out where these voices were coming from, and there it was. Another voice box, covered in cobwebs, looking like it was abandoned years ago. Why were these voice boxes on if the maze was closed? Later on, I found out that the answer to this question was super important. When I got to that sound box and found out that it was just another automated voice, I turned and started walking in a different direction. But then, out of nowhere, I hear a noise. And after that noise, chaos happens. Sprinklers shooting from everywhere in the corn maze. There was a sharp hiss, followed by a blast of water going all over my body. The sprinklers to the corn maze just turned on. Within a couple seconds, I was drenched. My hoodie turned into a sponge, my socks were squishing inside my shoes, and now, to make everything even better, the ground was muddy. And I had no idea where to run, because when I turned left, psh, more water. When I turned right, psh, more water. It wasn't just spraying all over the place. It was trapping me. I just started screaming, "Stop! Please stop!" As if the maze could hear me. Now I started sprinting. Did I have any idea where I was going? Nope. But I didn't care. I was just running, and that was my plan. And while I'm doing so, cutting through the sprinklers, what did I see once again? The red laser. Not flickering around or moving this time. No. It was just holding steady on this one specific spot. It was pointing forward, almost as if it was a compass, telling me what direction to go. I didn't want to trust it, but at that point, I had nothing left. My body was shaking from adrenaline and probably mild hypothermia, and I couldn't take seeing another scarecrow, hearing another voice box, so I just followed the laser. It just stayed ahead of me, as if it saw me and was moving forward as I did. I was still scared, honestly, kind of half expecting it to just lead me to my demise, but I didn't care. Because once you got water going down your you-know-what, you'll do just about anything to make that stop. As I'm following the laser, the corn stalks around me started to thin out for the first time. Not by much, but just enough so that the path was a little bit wider. I took that as a good sign, because when we first stepped into the maze, this was how it was. But as I'm starting to get some hope, still following the laser, I see something on the path ahead. Half buried in the mud, it was a backpack. Gray and torn open. I ran up to it cautiously, as if it might do something to me, and inside it were a few things that were still intact. A crumpled pamphlet from the pumpkin patch, a broken phone charger, and one shoe. It wasn't mine, it wasn't Jason's, and I had no idea how long it had been there. But it didn't look old. After taking a second to check this out, I went back to following the laser. It was the only thing in this nightmare that kind of made some sense, so I kept going towards it. The maze seemed to fight me harder the closer I got to it. More twists, more brush blocking the path, and then, just for a second, I hear footsteps. Not mine, and it didn't sound like an animal's, but it was fast, and heavy, and coming behind me. That is not what I meant. Wait, hold. I spun around, but saw nothing. But when I turned back, all of a sudden, my one shining light, the red laser dot, was gone. I screamed, begging for it to come back. Whoever was shining that laser, can you please do it again? But now, for the first time in probably an hour, the red laser didn't come back. My one sign of hope was gone. I was starting to break now. I didn't know if I was about to cry or scream or do both, but my legs felt shaky, my arms were cold and twitchy. But as I'm just standing there, giving up hope, I look around, and that's when I see it. Not a laser this time, not a scarecrow, not a teacher, but a light. A pale yellow light. It was faint, but unmistakable, glowing from probably 50 yards away, but it looked like it could have led to an exit. So I ran to it without thinking, tripped over a root, scrambled back up, turned right, turned left, and as I'm following it, I burst through one last wall of corn, and that's when I get into a new space I hadn't been to before. It was a lot more open, almost circular, unlike the rest of the path. The light was brighter now, flickering, almost as if it was coming from a lantern, and right next to it was a man. Finally, my first sign of hope. His boots were muddy, and he looked like someone who worked here. He was sitting on a folding chair, wearing a red baseball cap and a flannel shirt. He had a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, and in his hand, what was he holding? A laser pointer. He looked up when he saw me. Not startled, not angry, just relieved. There you are. Been trying to get your attention for the last hour. I just stood there, blinking at him. Soaked, shivering, speechless. He pointed in one of the 4 directions you could go from the path and said, "Exit's that way. Another 2 turns and you'll be out." I looked in the direction he said, and sure enough, I could see the faint glow of light coming from the pumpkin patch. The real world. He stepped forward and offered me a towel, which I took without question. "You okay?" I just nodded back to him yes and said, "Why were you using a laser?" "Well, we were trying to find you, and shouting doesn't really work because we don't know which direction to tell you to go, so we just use a laser. And usually, when the people get lost and see it, they follow it. But you didn't." I guess that's what I get for playing too much Call of Duty. I'm scarred from seeing a red laser. I just laughed a little because it turned out that little red laser that I was so scared of was my rescue. The man walked with me through the last few bends of the maze, talking to me like I just didn't have a full psychological breakdown. And apparently he was a volunteer at the pumpkin patch. He'd been working there for years. And whenever people got lost in the maze, it was pretty much his job to help them get out. The only difference this time was the maze was closed, So we weren't supposed to be in it, and that made things trickier. But when we got out of the maze, the pumpkin patch was completely empty. No kids, no groups, no buses, just my chaperone teacher pacing in circles with the phone on. She saw me and dropped everything. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, finally, where have you been? I didn't have a good answer to that question. She said they loaded both the buses already, did a head count, and realized I was gone. Jason told the teachers that I walked off into the maze and no one could find me. Apparently, Jason did get out way before I did, so I should have followed him. So the teacher drove me back to school in her own car. And I know what you're thinking. Tyler, you must have gotten in so much trouble for doing this. Well, actually, I didn't get in any, because the teacher didn't want to get busted for losing a kid, so we both agreed. Let's not tell anyone about this, and we'll have a truce. Moral of the story? There is none. So I'll just add this random outro.